Today we are going to predict the 53-man roster for the 2019 Green Bay Packers, in which, regardless whoever I pick, someone's gonna get mad at me. Grossi Posse Packer Nation, welcome to the episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom Grossi, and this is the final week of preseason football until we get to the promised land that is real football with real stakes, because right now I feel like we're watching Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the points don't matter and the rules are made up. See Winnipeg, an 80-yard field. Except, unlike Whose Like Is Anyway, it's not funny. So, when we're getting into the 53-man roster, the way I broke this down is we'll start off with the offense, then we'll go on to the defense, and then we'll go on with the practice squad. Now, obviously, I'm doing this before the fourth preseason game, in which many things can change. I'm not saying that there's going to be too many shifts in what players they're gonna sign, regardless of how they perform on Thursday, but injury is essentially what I'm getting at, is that regardless of how much I try to predict who's going to get injured, that will never go that way. So let's start off with the offense, in which this took hours upon hours constructing this 53-man roster, and it's not just because I had difficulties counting to 53, but more is that there are so many little nuances at so many different positions that could go either way. How many quarterbacks are we going to take? How many running backs are we going to keep? How many wide receivers are we going to keep? Are we going to keep 10 offensive linemen or 9 offensive linemen? Are we going to keep all 4 tight ends? Or are we going to cut Mercedes Lewis because Jimmy Graham can't block to save his life? This is just what's going on here on the first section. And so I tried to cut through the noise as much as I possibly could, looking at how they performed in camp, looking at how they performed in preseason, who has caught the coach's eye, which players that other veteran players have made comments about, anything that could potentially allude to where the Packers are looking. And again, I could be off on a few of these, in that I think that there's guys that are on the practice squad that I don't think should be on the practice squad. They should be on the 53-man roster. But this is a prediction of what I think the Green Bay Packers are going to do. And starting with the good old QB battle between Tim Boyle and Deshone Kizer. Now, obviously, the Green Bay Packers will be keeping one quarterback at least, and it's a guy you may have heard before, Aaron Rodgers. Kind of good kid, but inconsistent, and he might lose his roster spot. But yeah, obviously they'll have Aaron Rodgers, and the question is more, are they going to sign 3 quarterbacks or are they going to sign 2? Last year we went with 3, and this year I think we're going to go back down to 2, and I think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers and Tim Boyle. Now, Tim Boyle and Deshone Kizer, neither of these guys should be our backup. I want to be very clear about that. I am not sold on either of them. Tim Boyle had a good night in Winnipeg, in that he started out super slow. He missed a bunch of throws, some of them deep throws, and then he calmed down a little bit, finished the night with a pretty good stat line. Deshone Kizer, we traded with the Browns a former first-round pick in Demarius Randall, and we got Deshone Kizer. It'd be like, oh man, maybe this kid got some talent here. Deshone Kizer played last year, threw 2 interceptions, had a terrible stat line, didn't look great in the preseason, and that's kind of continued this year in the preseason as well. Is that Kizer, the reason I'm not putting Kizer on the 53, and quite honestly, I'm not going to put him on the practice squad either, it's just there hasn't been improvement. There hasn't been improvement, it seems, in camp. It doesn't seem like there's been improvement in game time situations. And so I personally have kind of given up on Kizer. Along with many other Packer fans, have been saying this for years, that we need to go out and get a veteran backup QB, because if Aaron Rodgers goes down, the Green Bay Packers are done for the entire season. I know it, you know it, the entire NFL knows it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it are the people who are running the Green Bay Packers. And so I'm going to say Rodgers and Boyle. There is a very good chance that they wind up just keeping 3 because they can't differentiate between the 2, but if we're going with what's going to provide the most value, the most need, I feel like Tim Boyle is at least going to be somewhat serviceable and has a bit of an upside, while Deshone Kizer, I'm just not seeing any improvement, and I think it's time to just cut our losses with him. Then moving on to running back. This is going against my heart and my soul because with running back, I like Dexter Williams more than Trey Carson. I've been very vocal about that. I've been adamant. Every time that he is playing in the preseason, I love his cuts, I love his agility, I love his speed, I love everything about it. The problem is the coaches keep on ragging on Dexter Williams, that he's not good at pass blocking, he's not good at the little fundamental things, the little things that Trey Carson is succeeding at and doing well at. And so because the coaches are more high on Trey Carson, I have Trey Carson taking this third running back spot. But we're obviously going to have Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams. I think Trey Carson's going to take it, and then we'll take Danny Vitale as well. We'll get our little fullback action there. He's been all over camp. Aaron Rodgers loves the guy. I don't think there's any way he doesn't make the 53. But there is a possibility that we go with 4 running backs and we potentially we get Dexter Williams on there as well. I feel like Williams definitely has more potential, is more talented. But if we're going with who can help the Green Bay Packers right now, I think it's going to be Trey Carson, or at least that's where the coaches are leaning towards. I hope that Dexter Williams at least gets a practice squad spot, and pray that he passes waivers and doesn't get picked up by anybody else, because I think the guy has a ton of potential and a ton of talent. Then moving on to the tight end, I think this is where we are going to keep 4 people, and it's simply because each guy kind of just is either has potential or can only do one thing. Like one can catch, one can block. And so we'll obviously keep Jimmy Graham. He's the guy who can maybe catch. We're going to keep Mercedes Lewis because he's the guy who can block. And then we're going to keep Jace Sternberger because we just drafted him, who, you know, there's obviously some growth that needs to happen there. And then Big Bob, Rob Tonyan, I want him too, just because he didn't get a lot of playing time last year, but I loved what he brings. I think he has a bunch of potential, and he'll force Sternberger to kind of up his competition. But I think that they'll wind up keeping 4 here. But I could see them potentially cut Lewis or Tonyan. I can see it going either way and only keeping 3. Then we get to wide receiver. Now, this is just a convoluted mess trying to figure out who the Packers are going to keep as wide receivers. They could potentially keep 6 people, they can keep 7 people, there's people who are going to potentially go on IR with designations to return. It could go all over the place. Right now, how I have it, because there's so much talent right there at receiver, I have them getting 7 guys. However, I think the door will be left open for one other wide receiver to join, because I believe they're going to move EQ to IR with the designation to return. So right now at wide receiver, I have Devontae Adams, MVS, Geronimo Allison, EQ, Kumaro, Davis, and then I have Shepard. I like Shepard a lot. This may be a little bit of personal bias, but the reason why I'm picking Shepard over Lazard is because Devontae Adams has come out and said how smart Shepard is. He's impressed in just about every single preseason game with his catches and his ability to get separation. I like Shepard a lot, and I think he's also going to cause problems for other teams in the special teams unit. So with that being said, I feel like they're going to get 7 wide receivers. However, EQ, considering he's supposed to miss a good chunk of time with his leg injury, I think that they're going to wind up potentially bringing on Lazard as after he clears waivers, if he clears waivers. Because the way that it works is that you can only designate 2 people to return off IR. I think they'll use one on EQ, meaning that he has to sign with the 53-man roster at the end of this week. If he does that, then great. Then you could put him on IR, and if Lazard clears waivers, then they can bring him on. So there's potential you could see Lazard and Shepard, and then those 2 could duke it out for when EQ comes back on who's going to move down to the practice squad. But right now I have them keeping 7 wide receivers. That means that Jamon Moore is not going to make the team in this prediction. But I see a window where Lazard and Shepard can make it, but one of them will eventually go down to the practice squad. Then I have us going with the good old offensive line. I have us keeping 9. I could see us going 10, but right now what I have is Bakhtiari, Light, Lane Taylor, Jenkins, Lindsley, Turner, Lucas Patrick, Brian Bulaga, and Justin McCray. Justin McCray is like the one I was potentially thinking about taking out, but considering he can move around a little bit and He's been on the Packers for a while. I feel like they're going to allow him to stay, and we'll just sign some other guys to the practice squad. A question is going to be about Cole Madison, considering he took that year off of football. Cole Madison has been playing pretty well, but I think he could use another year on the practice squad to kind of fine-tune, and then he'll wind up taking somebody's spot next year. And again, we could wind up taking 10. We can potentially get Neiman on there, but right now I have them just going 9. So that's where I'm at. So if you add all of those together, you are going to wind up having 26 players on the offense. And there can be some changes here. They can wind up signing 3 running backs. They can wind up getting Dexter Williams instead of Trey Carson or in addition to, and then that's going to cut either from the tight end pool or your wide receiver pool. So I think there's could be changes either way there, or they could potentially add another offensive lineman just to get a little bit more depth. Then let's move on to the defensive side of the ball, which makes things a little bit clearer, but where things get a little muddled is with injuries. So when we're starting with the defensive line, I think you're obviously going to have Kenny Clark, you're going to have Dean Lowry, who was just extended. You have Montrevious Adams. You got good old Kiki, do you love me? You have Lancaster as well, so they'll wind up keeping 5 defensive linemen. I think that's pretty set. I think Looney will wind up going over into the practice squad. Then for outside linebacker, you have Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Kyler Fackrell, or should I say Sackrell, and I think they'll keep Reggie Gilbert as well, so 5 there. And then for inside linebacker, this is where things get a little bit complicated. You obviously have Blake Martinez, who's the only inside linebacker who's basically not hurt right now. You do have Summers, who I think will make the team out of just, they got no other bodies. I love the guy's motor. He's all over the place. He does have some missed tackles, but I think he's going to be able to progress. And then you have Oren Burks. Oren Burks, Matt LaFleur is refusing to give out any injury information, so I have no idea what's going on with Oren Burks or with Bolton. I don't know what's going on with either of them. Bolton was having reps with the first offense, and so I think there's a good chance that he is going to make the team, but he was in a knee brace and in crutches. He's off the crutches now, but there's no timetable of when he's going to return. I don't know if either of these guys are going to make IR, so I put both of them on the team because obviously Oren Burks is going to make the 53. Whether or not he goes to IR is depending on how injured he actually is. Obviously, he's not going to have to get surgery, so it wasn't as bad as we thought. And then Bolton, if he can come back within a good amount of time, I don't think they would use a designated to return on him, but he can sneak onto the 53 as well. Another question is going to be about James Crawford. I see a lot of people saying that James Crawford could potentially make the team. He can if one of these guys goes on IR. I think they'll definitely wind up signing him, but I feel like he's made so many mistakes this past preseason, and he hasn't looked amazing in practice. And so I see this is going to be our 4 right here. But if one of these guys go to IR, I can see them going with Crawford because they're going to need another body. They obviously just signed a linebacker from the Ravens, but that just might be so they can field a team this week for the preseason game. Then with cornerback, I see them obviously going with Jair Alexander, Tremont Williams. You're also going to have Kevin King. Hopefully he stays healthy. Josh Jackson, Tony Brown, and then Kadar Holman. Kadar Holman has impressed just about everybody. The one issue is that he is also injured, so hopefully the timetable for that is pretty short for him to return, but this is where I see us keeping our cornerbacks. And then for safety, I see them going with Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, Raven Green, who could potentially also go to inside linebacker as well, so that could shake some things up, and then also Campbell. They'll probably wind up keeping him as another safety. And then for kicker, you haven't heard a whole lot about Ficken, and so I think that's going to be fine for Crosby. You have J.K. Scott, of course, if he's able to graduate high school on time. And then you have Hunter Bradley as your long snapper. And so with the defense, you'll have 24 people, and then with the special teams, you have 3. Then moving on finally to our practice squad, which I don't think all of these guys are going to clear waivers, and I think any of these guys who I'm listing right now have potential to make the 53, depending on injury and what have you. But right now for the practice squad, I have Cole Madison, Alan Lazard, you have Kavian Ento, James Looney, Randy Ramsey. You also have Jamon Moore. You have Natrell Jamerson, Dexter Williams, which hurts me because I feel like he's just going to get signed. I really hope he makes the 53. Yosh Neiman, and then Chandon Sullivan. All of these guys have played pretty well in camp and or the preseason and have shown a bunch of potential. I think that these are pretty good bets to make the practice squad. But let me know if I've missed anybody, if you disagree with one of these. Again, this is not necessarily what I want. This is where I think the Packers are going to go. I would love for Dexter Williams to take over for Trey Carson because I think there is more potential there. I just don't know if they're going to go for that. Jamon Moore, again, I think his best shot right now is through the practice squad and shutting everyone up there. And you never know, with injuries, he may be called up from the practice squad and get his opportunity and get his moment. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout out and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. So we'll continue this week, and we'll obviously, when the 53-man roster is actually announced, we'll do a video over the weekend about that as well. But thank you so much for watching. I am Tom Grossi, and as always, go Pack Go.